I love AI, but this is human written, human performed. The Monster and the Wolf's Secret, a modern fable. A monster is what? A scary-looking creature? Or a creature that's evil? Well, I suppose if we're talking a real monster, it would have to be both. Yet almost every time a human being is called a monster, and deserves it, it's because the person is evil, not because of the way they look. So why say they're a monster when they're not? It's because monster, even said as an exaggeration, is one of the most accurate metaphors. But that's just people. There are no real monsters, because if there were, we'd know it. We'd know everything about them. We'd know so much about them, they would cease to be monsters and just be more animals. Which brings up an interesting fact. Of all the animal species that exist on Earth, it is estimated only 20% of them have been discovered, which means 80% of the species on Earth are unknown to us. That should make all of us wonder if there's anything out there truly fitting of the word monster. If there is, it would be an undiscovered species, to say the least. The largest forest on Earth is called the taiga. It's 3 times larger than the Amazon rainforest. The taiga is also known as the boreal forest, as in Aurora Borealis. You can see it from here. Boreal means northern. So this enormous forest spans the top of the planet. A lot of the taiga has been extensively explored, but the taiga is so humongous that there are still vast regions of it that no human being has ever set foot in. And in these places where no one has been, there is a monster that no one knows about. And its species is ancient. But despite no human being having ever come in contact with it, the species has a name. How did we give it a name if we've never even known it exists? We didn't give it the name. The name was given by Neanderthal 120,000 years ago. The Neanderthal was able to travel unusually far north due to it being the warm interglacial period of the Pleistocene Ice Age. That long ago, the area was tundra, not forest. It was only after the Ice Age that the enormous forest emerged. But once the Neanderthal had ventured that great distance north, it would have been impossible to roam the area and not eventually see the creature. And so he did. And seeing it had a profound effect on him, because from that point on, it's all his mind would return to. After the long journey back down, he rejoined his group, and was more than eager to tell them about the creature he'd seen. Neanderthals could speak in a primitive language. So with his high-set larynx and short, broad tongue, he referred to the animal by saying, Eneb. E being a Neanderthal's reference to any white-furred snow animal, and Neb meaning big man. Since the species remains undiscovered by modern humans, it's only right that the Neanderthal's word be used, since it is the most recent. Thus, Eneb. Now, Enebs definitely look like monsters, but are they? What are their personalities like? Well, you may be hilariously disappointed to hear that they're actually very peaceful, reiterating the point that there are no real monsters. But not so fast, because there's a reason we've traveled all the way to the taiga, and it is for a monster. And this is it. Feast your eyes on this child of nature. This little animal is the answer to our question, because as unusual as Enebs are, this one is absolutely surreal, because this one doesn't just look like a monster. It is one. Now, I said a monster would cease to be a monster if we discovered it, because then we'd see it as an animal. So why do I say this one, Eneb, is a monster? I say it because the more you learn about this one, the more it will prove to you that it's a monster. Things get a little scary from here, because this Eneb does something very unusual. It kills other animals. But don't we have a whole world full of animals that kill other animals just to eat? Why is that unusual here? It's unusual because Enebs are herbivores. They don't eat meat. This one kills not for food, or territory, or skill honing, or any other reason one animal might kill another. This one kills because it's a freak of nature. In its brain is the psychological compulsion to kill every animal it sees and hears. And so it does. And after it does, it wanders away and doesn't care. It's a monster. It's true that bad influences can force a monstrous personality into an innocent person or animal. But that's not what happened here. This thing was born a monster. And the dawning moment of its monstrousness was its first violence. It was committed against the Enebs who brought it into this world and nurtured it. And they did an excellent job of that, because the monster grew big and strong enough to suddenly reveal what it really was. So fated to wander this gargantuan forest alone, the monster brutally lashed out against its kindred. As this violence plays out, we'll turn away. And it's time you knew the wolf's secret. Extremely few people know this, that all wolves have a secret, and have for almost 1 million years. The secret is a very subtle, real form of telepathy. As grandiose as it may sound, wolves can communicate telepathically. It's not supernatural, it's just something possible that the world doesn't know of yet. The telepathy comes from wolves thriving as pack hunters. Their pack hunting is based on their ability to communicate. So over hundreds of thousands of years, as wolves steadily perfected communicating through vocalization, body language, and what's called scent marking, with those a form of telepathy emerged and developed too. The telepathy manifests itself like this. It allows any wolf to sense the location and intention of other wolves without needing to see, hear, or smell them. So purely on instinct, wolves are connected. Amazingly, the telepathy isn't just in wolves, it's also in modern dogs, because dogs were bred from wolves. Real tests have been done to show that dogs know when their owners intend to come home, even if the owner is very far away. For example, on the other side of a town, the dog knows when the owner starts to travel home. In the future, science will explain this. But right now, it's the wolf's secret, and the dog's secret. There are many wolves in the taiga, and we're about to focus in on a very significant pack of wolves that happens to be in the process of producing a lone wolf. Lone wolves are common in the wolf population, and this one is absolutely typical. It is 2 years old and ready to begin its own pack. It's been spending more time off on its own, and as any wolf does when it becomes a lone wolf, it just leaves without any notice. There he goes. Hunting is difficult for lone wolves because they're not hunting with their pack anymore, so lone wolves scavenge for food, which our wolf will have to do. And he'll be doing it in the area called the Auroral Oval. This is a very remote northern location where the aurora borealis occurs in its full glory. And partly because of the aurora, these remote regions of the taiga have tremendous appeal to those whose passion is the most extreme hiking. And we're about to see a hiker who has just completed the immensely difficult challenge of hiking the taiga. This is the first human to ever enter this specific area of the taiga. It took him an entire month, and he hiked alone through harsh terrain and extreme cold. He chose this place because here you can stand directly under the aurora borealis at its strongest, and he's about to receive his transcendent reward. Looking like glowing dust beginning to sprinkle down toward him, the aurora begins to manifest in the sky. It's even more vibrant than he imagined. It's so bright it lights up the entire landscape, making it appear otherworldly. Our hiker can see himself and everything around him in perfect, glowing clarity. Naturally, for our hiker, documenting this achievement is very meaningful, and he's already picked out the place he wants to hang this photograph, large on the main wall of his living room so he can see it every day. The hiker puts his pack down and takes out his camera. He walks out into the picturesque clearing that he considers to be the finish line of his adventure. Pointing the camera to the sky, he takes lots of photos. He thinks to himself, one of these is bound to turn out well. As he lowers his camera to scroll through the photos on the LED screen, he hears a sound in front of him. He lifts his eyes, and he can't believe his eyes. Wandering into the clearing with its head straight up looking at the aurora is a big, white, furred creature. It looks terrifying. It's an Eneb, and not just any. This is the monster. The aurora is so bright the hiker knows he'll be seen. He's afraid, and he's too far from the bear spray in his pack to make a run for it. Hikers know turning their back to an animal and running can be the worst thing to do. So thinking quickly, he lies down and plays dead. The Eneb doesn't notice. The hiker listens. The creature will walk away on its own, but it's wandering this way. Suddenly, the Eneb starts breathing loudly. It's seen the hiker. The worst has happened. The monster hustles over. Its heavy footsteps boom louder as it gets close. The monster looms over the hiker. It's highly curious, and the creature scurries around him, leaning down and sniffing. It pushes him around and presses on him. It hurts, but the hiker doesn't move. The Eneb is trying to figure out what this thing on the ground is. It's never seen anything like it. But the aurora is growing brighter and expanding across the entire night sky. The Eneb is right under it. The shimmering light and color grabs its attention from the hiker. The monster looks straight up and watches the aurora shimmer and swirl. And even though the Eneb has seen the aurora hundreds of times, it does now what it always does when it sees the aurora. It reaches into the air and swipes at it with its claws. The monster thinks the aurora is alive, and it wants to get at it. Slashing furiously, hitting nothing but air, the Eneb looks ridiculous. But that has nothing to do with how dangerous it is. The hiker, without being seen, slowly and carefully looks up at the animal as it flails around. The hiker sees the visceral grit of this creature. It's even more terrifying up close. It's beyond belief. The monster starts to slowly wander away, still with its head pointed up at the sky, thinking it's getting closer to the moving light. Our hiker exhales, and he's the first person to encounter an Eneb since the Neanderthal who named it 120,000 years ago. Nearby, a scavenging animal approaches. It's our lone wolf. The hiker's backpack was left open when he took the camera out. There's food in the backpack, and the lone wolf can smell it. Wolves move extremely silently. The lone wolf practically glides like a ghost to the hiker's open backpack. And then our lone wolf sticks his snout in. Big mistake. The plastic and paper wrappers of trail mix and instant oatmeal crinkle. The Eneb's head whips around. It hears the wolf loud and clear. Eyes on it, the monster explodes, running headlong after the wolf. Our wolf abandons the food and bolts in full panic. The Eneb's mind is on fire, and all it wants to do is run this wolf down. And it can. The wolf tries to escape into the forest, but the aurora is so strong, the wolf's tracks are bright and deep, and the monster is hot on its trail, running fast and loud. Our lone wolf is only barely out of adolescence. His only instinct is to get help from his pack, which he can sense a distance away and is heading straight for. Meanwhile, that distance away, the pack is serene. 6 wolves rest outside their den, while inside the alpha female nuzzles her newborn pups. But suddenly the alpha male senses the lone wolf's return. The alpha male stands up. He's alarmed. The other wolves stand up. The group needs to run, but they can't leave the pups. And it doesn't matter anyway because they are out of time. Suddenly they hear chaos coming towards them. Slicing through the forest, the lone wolf bolts in and scurries around the other wolves. The pack is frazzled, trying to process their sibling suddenly barging in. But while their heads are turned, yipping at the lone wolf, the Eneb tears through the forest like a wrecking ball, landing with a boom on top of the pack. It's a frenzy of fighting and confusion. The pack attacks the Eneb, biting and clinging to it, trying to tear it apart, but they're no match for the monster. It grabs the biting wolves by their mouths and pries them off its limbs, swinging them through the air, hitting the other wolves back, and then throwing them at the big alpha male. Now the Eneb has given itself room to work, and it's got its claws out, and they're big and sharp, and they don't miss. The pack is afraid to engage. They surround the monster and snarl and growl, but that's a desperate move. They know they can't get close without getting hurt. And all the noise they're making and fangs they're showing are just a wolf's instinct to assess the danger of a situation and make a decision. And now they've decided. The monster is too dangerous. They can't fight it. All the wolves flee, except the alpha male. So on this freezing cold night, the alpha male stands his ground. This big wolf refuses to abandon his alpha female and pups. And he's not snarling or assessing. He's ready. He stares at the monster stares right back. The Eneb takes one step forward. The alpha male launches at the monster. And unlike the other wolves attacking on instinct, the alpha male is deliberate. He knows he has to kill this thing. Here we won't skip the violence. The alpha male gets good hard bites in, but the Eneb still manages to grab the big wolf and send him flying into the snow. But the instant the alpha male hits the ground, he's back at the Eneb like a lightning bolt with even more aggression. This time attacking high, the big wolf knows he has to take the monster down as quickly as possible, so he lunges with his jaw wide open, biting the monster's face, driving his fangs as far as they'll go. The Eneb feels real pain for the first time in its life. It grabs at the alpha male, desperate to get it off, but pulling the big wolf just makes its fangs carve up the monster's face. The monster screams and bleeds for the first time too. But wild animals aren't capable of understanding that they just committed a tactical error, and the alpha male just committed a huge one. Because biting the Eneb's face wasn't going to kill it, but it has now kicked in the monster's adrenaline, and that will end this war. With the wolf's head so close to the Eneb's jaw, and the Eneb willing to do anything to get the wolf off, the monster powers through worse pain to try and open its mouth and pull the wolf towards it. The Eneb continues to strain to get its mouth open all the way. It can't do it, but then it does, and not wasting a millisecond, in one fast, hard bite down, the monster cracks the wolf's skull, opening it up to the freezing cold air. The alpha male immediately goes limp and falls hard to the ground with a thud. The Eneb clutches its face. Looking out the entrance of the den, the alpha female saw the whole thing, and seeing the alpha male fall and lie motionless, she's shocked and begins to do what only the most desperate wolves do. Bark. Wolves never bark. They howl. But when a wolf is truly desperate, it'll bark. And right now, our lady wolf barks her head off. The monster's face isn't bleeding anymore. The gashes and blood have frozen. There's no pain, no distraction. Its mind returns to its psychological compulsion to destroy every animal it comes across. And right now it hears an animal barking louder and louder. The monster rears around and gets its eyes on the lady wolf. And so it comes down to this. The female can either stay and fight or run, but neither will save her pups. So what does she do? The alpha female stands tall. She will block the entrance of her den even if it costs her her life. And now she barks louder than maybe any wolf ever has. She sounds off with enough power to wake the entire taiga. Her barking wakes the alpha male. He's still alive, but he can't move. His skull is cracked open, and steam-like vapor flows from his warm brain into the cold air. How can he still be alive? The Eneb's teeth tore into his head? Not quite. Enebs have flat teeth. They're herbivores. So the monster's flat teeth broke the wolf's skull, but didn't pierce the wolf's brain, leaving the alpha male alive and badly hurt. But as the big wolf lies there, all he experiences are the desperate cries of the alpha female. He has never heard her afraid, and that brings out the most excruciating emotions. Terror, shock, weakness, but more than all of those combined, it brings out incredible determination. All at once, the alpha male's will to save his family is so strong that something happens. Desperate to stop the monster, but unable to move, the big wolf makes a heartbreaking effort to continue to fight. And it extends to his subtle telepathy, which this time is not so subtle, because the wolf's skull is open, and that changes things, like someone screaming behind a door and then opening the door. The signal isn't being reduced by the barrier of his skull, so the true strength of the wolf's telepathy is revealed. Our alpha male didn't know any of that. His only thought was to stop the monster, and that was the right thought, because the strong telepathic signal transmitted to the Eneb's brain. But what the monster received was not a message. It was just pure signal. And the monster stood and received it. And in that moment, if you'd put your ear to the Eneb's head and listened for a sound, you'd have heard a flurry of muffled pops, like bubble wrap being stepped on inside its skull. Those little pops weren't so little to the Eneb. They were in its prefrontal cortex, hippocampus, and temporal lobe, the places wolves receive their telepathic transmissions. Even though the intensity was brief and the pops were tiny, it was more than enough to shock the Eneb's brain. The monster stood, not moving. It stood, and then collapsed face first in the dirty snow. The wolf pack is saved. The lady wolf stops barking. Her eyes are on the monster. It lies there not moving. She looks to her alpha male. He's not moving either. She quickly hurries over. Up close she can see what's left of him. She nudges him with her nose, but by this time the freezing cold air has stilled the alpha male's brain. She's sad and whimpers. She wants to stay with him and sleep here, but she has to return to their pups, and her instincts tell her to check again if the monster is still alive. So she does. She runs over and quickly circles around to the Eneb's face. She sees its tongue hanging out, lying in the dirt, and its eyes are crossed, staring at nothing. It won't hurt anyone now. She doesn't whimper for the monster. Moving to the entrance of the den, she looks back at the two motionless animals. Apart from her relationship with the alpha male, her animal mind will never understand what just happened. All she knows is that it's very cold, the cold wind hurts, and there's nothing to salvage from the two animals lying on the ground. She points her face to the sky and howls, calling the other wolves to come back. She doesn't blame them for running away. The wolves hear her, spring to their feet, and start running towards the den. Our lone wolf is a little reluctant to follow them, but does. The alpha female's throat hurts. She's tired of using her voice, Quietly, she enters the den and curls around her pups. They're a little cold, but now they'll be warm. Her 5 other wolves arrive, sniffing and inspecting the alpha male and monster as she did. Then they enter the den quietly too. They're excited to see the alpha female, and the group makes little sweet sounds to each other as they reunite. But outside, our lone wolf runs up and stops. He stands in the freezing wind staring at the monster that was once pulsating with hot-blooded fury, and is now lying cold in the snow. The lone wolf doesn't go any closer. He watches the dead monster from a distance. The monster's fur moves in the wind. Its heavy body doesn't. The lone wolf's fur moves in the wind too. He doesn't know why what he sees is so important. Just that he's still scared of the monster, even seeing it like this. It's freezing outside, and our lone wolf doesn't know what to do now. The other wolves are in the den, the monster's gone, and our wolf has nowhere to go. He turns to the den and moves toward it. He hesitates before he enters, but does, slowly. He knows he has to be accepted. It's the alpha female's decision. Our lone wolf stands in the entrance, going no farther. The alpha female lifts her head and looks at the lone wolf. She knows his scent immediately. He was once her pup, and she curled around him to keep him warm, as she does now for the new pups. She makes the slightest vocal sound, saying, "He's hers, and he's home." We rush in and join the huddle of wolves. We can't see a thing in the dark den, but we can feel warm, friendly fur all around us. We're all safe now, and all our wounds will heal. The end. Important. Please subscribe and like, because the internet should be more than just memes, even though I love memes. Let us finally ascend to real art and entertainment. The more support these stories receive, the more profoundly we will transform the internet. Help me elevate the internet by subscribing and liking. Thank you.